Hi there once again. Ben Rogers Jr. is talking to you once again. Pay close attention. Wonderful things are going to happen. You just wait and see. Now for this posting, what I want to do is talk to you about a time in my life when I did some comedy writing for a comic who worked at the Purple Onion in San Francisco. And this was way back in the early 60s, 1960s. When it was a Discovery Club. That's where Phyllis Diller got her start. The Smothers Brothers got their start and so forth. And this fellow's name is Albert T. Berry. And when I worked with him, this would have been about 1963, I believe. And I wrote a sketch for him which had to do with a missionary who goes to South America trying to make converts. Only it just doesn't work out very well. He makes virtually no converts whatsoever, and all the worse, I mean, it's just a total shambles. And anyway, Al, and we discussed it, and we decided that he'd better not do it. And so I'm going to do the sketch for you, but afterward then I'd like to make some comments on why it was that Al and I decided he better not do it. Now, we decided that we'd frame this whole thing. This was something, a rather larger thing he had in mind anyway, that had to do with an old burlesque house on Main Street in Los Angeles, which has been turned into a rescue mission. And you can imagine the scene there in those years on Main Street. It was just the toilet of L.A. Very bad scene indeed. And here's this burlesque theater. It's gone now, you see. And you can still see the traces of it. The marquee is saying something about, on our screen, Illegal Doctor, starring Claudette Goldberg and Schmucky Rooney. And then underneath it says, One Night of Bliss for 1,000 Nights in Hell. And something about 20 girls, 20, 19 costumes, 19. And you can imagine the candy butcher walking his way. That candy butcher is the guy who sells candy in a burlesque, and he's walking him, selling candy and all this stuff. But then he comes along with a line of French postcards, 6 for $5. Ladies and gentlemen, these are innocent enough, but hold them up to the light. Hold them up to the light, and amazing things will happen. I urge you, incidentally, as a pass amongst you in selling these, do not let them fall into the hands of a minor. Well, the burlesque is gone. It is now a rescue mission. And so let's go into the mission and hear this pathetic minister. He has returned from the jungles of South America. Let's hear him. Thank you so much, Reverend McPheeters, for the kind things you've said about the mission. And I do wish my wife were here to share the joy of it with me, but she's not. She's still up there in the Duncan country working with the Indians. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for wearing the hat, but as you can see, I'm still in a state, and it tends to kind of stop the bleeding. So that, oh, Jesus, ow, ow, ow. Thank you too, Mrs. McPheeters, for preparing the refreshments that I know we've all enjoyed so much. I'm a little gassy from it. It's because of the malaria, the dysentery, and the jungle fever. And thank you too, Sister Agatha, for playing and singing Operator Give Me Heaven, I Know My Mother's There. You've come a long way with that darling organ of yours. By the jungle fever, the words don't come out just right. Well, let me think here. I was going to tell you about the mission. Well, it was a good deal less than an unqualified success. Matter of fact, we made no converts, and we lost some of our party to paganism, including my wife. Well, you'll recall that we raised the money for this mission by the sale of the little alabaster statues of Christ which glow in the dark. Now, I know that brought a great comfort to many of you. I am sorry about the radiation burns. Most of you healed up pretty good, except for the scarring. We did, however, lose Mr. and Mrs. Jones. They got greedy and bought 10 of the things. I wonder if you wouldn't join me now in prayer for them. Oh Lord, take Mr. and Mrs. Jones into heaven with you, Lord. Don't let them fry down in hell because they got pretty badly singed right here on earth. Thank you, Jesus. Well, now let me tell you about the mission itself. We came along to New York City, and we had accommodations on a cattle boat. Now, it was my understanding we used to have accommodations in the steerage. We did all right. They put us down with the steers. Pretty slippery down there. I don't want to go into it, but anyway, we did finally get to Rio de Janeiro, and it was there that we met our guide, a remarkable old man who took us out of Rio and into the jungle, and did that despite the handicap of his blindness. However, he did prove to be quite a burden to our party, especially my wife. She had to carry him most of the way. Well, now, the Ungunka Indians are an extremely primitive people, and it became a thrill for us to teach them the use of sticks and stones. But they took that knowledge and used it against us and made prisoners of us all. Now, primitive though they are in so many respects, they're highly advanced in others, especially they are head shrinking. And they might have body shrinking, as Brother Lawrence found out to his misfortune. And, well, I'm glad to say I was able to bring him back to the United States for a decent Christian burial, and, well, I don't know, I guess I got him in my other suit. Well, now, you know, the problem we had almost immediately was that Brother Leonard. He was a smarty pants. I told him, I said, let's build a solid foundation before we distribute the Bibles. He didn't pay attention to me, started giving them out. Coincidentally, they found out the use we was making of Charmin tissue, that bathroom tissue, so that, well, I don't even want to talk about it. It's so bad. Anyway, Reverend McFeeters here has suggested what we ought to do is maybe just print up some Bible verses on, say, heavyweight butcher paper, and we'll let it go at that. And I guess that's what we'll do for the next attempt when we go down there. Now, I tell you, cannibalism is still a living force amongst the Ngunka Indians, and one by one the members of our party disappeared to the unnatural appetite of the savages until there's only 3 of us left. My wife, Brother Bill, and myself. Well, Brother Bill wasn't much good at missionary work, you know that. So I became faint and turned him in. They served him up that night, au gratin style maître d'hôtel. Like I say, primitive though they are, they're highly advanced in others, especially the art of chefing. Well, I was spared from death through my wife. You see, the natives come to believe that she was a white goddess. Well, they soon grew tired of that idea and decided to make a white slave of her, and I'm sorry to say she went along with the idea. Her sense of mission is different from my own, I'll tell you that. But anyway, she's the priestess of a sex cult down there where they have orgies atop trees. I don't know what they're trying to do up there. Maybe it's a cargo cult, whatever, something of the sort. Well, here we are back in the United States. I'm not altogether a well man, but I'm anxious to return to the Ngunka country to make as many converts as I possibly can and to reconvert my wife if she isn't given over completely to sex and drugs. Orgies on the top of trees. My God. Well, as I look out there, some of your young faces, you young people, I'd like you to join me in the missionary field. There's dangers, of course, decapitation, strangulation, mutilation, dangers, of course. But there's also the help, the people that need the help, that want the help. And I still have the last words of the Ngunka Indians burning in my ears. Which means, roughly translated, come back, white man, and bring with you more Coca-Cola. Thank you. Isn't it a miracle? Look at how this change of clothes was done in about less than a second. I mean, here we're talking industrial strength videography. Think about it. Well, now you saw the sketch. It's innocuous, you'll say, and it really is. But at the particular time we were talking about, this was 1963. This was the age of the McCarthys and the age of J. Edgar Hoover and all of this stuff. It was the age of Lenny Bruce. And Bruce was having a lot of problems. He was being busted for drugs, busted for obscenity, and one thing or another. He was literally just hounded almost to death. In 1961, he was scheduled to give a concert at Carnegie Hall in New York City. And it was late in the season, and the snow was falling, and they had a blizzard. And the next thing you know, although the curtain was supposed to have gone up around, 8:30, nobody couldn't even get to the auditorium. But they didn't call it off, and people began to slowly make their way through. I don't know how they did it, but they finally all got there. It was about midnight. And at that point, Bruce himself came out and did a 2-hour show, which was recorded. Now, one of the highlights of his presentation was a sketch having to do with Jesus and Moses entering St. Patrick's Cathedral. And this is at a moment when Francis Cardinal Spellman was doing a mass before the great altar. And he looks around and he sees Jesus and Moses, and of course here are lepers and beggars and all in this stench and all the rest of it. And he's completely flummoxed. He doesn't know what to do. So he phones the Pope. And he says, well, what am I going to do with these people? And the Pope advises, well, take them into the chancellery. Well, Spellman says to the Pope, he says, I can't, it's full. I've got a lot of kids staying over with me. Oh boy. The audience picked up on it immediately. First of all, it was really not true that Francis Cardinal Spellman was a pedophile. No, that was not the case. But he was the most uncloseted gay the world has ever known. I mean, if he lived in a closet at all, it had glass doors on it, I'll tell you that. Everybody knew this kind of thing, but you didn't talk about it, and you sure as hell don't make a record saying something like that. A few days later, there was an enormous success, incidentally, this concert. And he was charged and ready to just sweep the country. He went to Chicago, I believe it was, and he hadn't even started a show in his club when the captain of police came in, and he says, if you say one goddamn thing about the Catholic Church, he says, I'm going to bust you and bust this club. So that's a new phase for poor old Lenny Bruce. What had it amounted to is the clubs were afraid to take him in for fear that they would lose their license. I've always felt that that this is all the work of the Catholic Church and J. Edgar Hoover and even Roy Cohn, another member of this unspeakable mafia. So even though this sketch that I wrote for Al is more or less pretty innocuous, even then, to make fun of religion just wasn't done in those days. No comics did it. And as you can see it now, it's perfectly innocuous. If you really want to see religion trashed and trashed good, I recommend it go to YouTube, and look up George Carlin and Carlin's sketches on religion. You'll love them. You'll love them. I'll see you next time with something new.